Some common sense has been shown by one of our universities over the pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas and anti-Israeli protests. Deakin University in Melbourne has told the protest encampment to pack up and leave. The uni's letter to protest organisers says they were supposed to wrap up last week and that the camp and the protests are compromising the safety and well-being of students and staff at the campus. Protesters say they'll dig in and defy those orders, so two big questions actually loom. Will the university and the police presumably go in and forcibly remove the protesters? And then will other universities follow suit? Most of the other universities are far too feeble to take any action, so all eyes will be on Deakin for now. The protests continue to make outlandish claims, accusing Israel of genocide and of targeting civilians, claims that are demonstrably untrue. And they continue, these protesters, to barrack for intifada, which is armed insurrection and the killing of innocents by terrorists, and they chant from the river to the sea. In other words, chant for the elimination of the State of Israel. Yet despite these violent chants and the obvious intimidation of Jewish students or supporters of Israel, the university leaders defend these protests on the grounds of freedom of speech. Yeah, freedom for some and intifada for those who disagree. At Monash University, a group of Jewish students and supporters were holding a peaceful ceremony to commemorate the victims of terrorism, the innocent people killed by Hamas on October the 7th. And they were deliberately targeted by pro-Palestinian protesters. Imagine that, targeting a commemoration of innocent terrorism victims. Still, some of these protesters actually say they support Hamas, openly support Hamas. So I guess we shouldn't expect decency. Meanwhile, in Parliament today, Peter Dutton asked a critical question.
Prime Minister, 130 hostages still remain in tunnels after the October 7 attacks by Hamas on Israel last year, in which 1,200 people were massacred, and violent anti-Semitism is on the rise here in Australia and indeed around the world. Why did the Prime Minister make a captain's call to back Palestine's bid for full United Nations membership, breaching faith with our Jewish community and decades of bipartisanship and putting us at odds with allies including the United States, the United Kingdom and Canada?
Contrary to the Leader of the Opposition's depiction of this, the Australian Government has had a long-term position of support for a two-state solution. And in this, I accept responsibility for government decisions as Prime Minister. We had a proper process to make that decision through all of our appropriate channels. The people who are vehemently opposed to that resolution, include Hamas, include people who have a view that there should be just a single state from the river to the sea, as the chant goes. That is not my position. That is not the government's position. And it also wasn't the position of Japan, Korea, the New Zealand Conservative government led by Christopher Luxon, ASEAN, of all of those countries who all overwhelmingly voted for that motion.
Yeah, also China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, Syria. Why not list all those fellow travellers? And what about the countries Australia did not vote with, like Israel, the United States, the United Kingdom and Canada? Again, lots of words from Albanese with little meaning. Is he actually pretending that the terrorists of Hamas would be disappointed by this propaganda win at the United Nations? Is he saying that rather than rewarding Hamas, Australia's capitulation will rile them? Seriously. The PM needs to understand that mainstream voters might not be quite as gullible as a bunch of university protesters in Palestinian scarves. Now, just on this war and the facts, I've said before that we have to be very sceptical indeed about claims made when it comes to casualties in Gaza. They're bandied about by protesters and the media, but the only numbers coming out of Gaza are numbers that Hamas allows out of Gaza. So they're always dodgy, and they shouldn't be parroted the way they are by protesters, by the media, by politicians, or by the United Nations. And just to demonstrate this exact point, the UN quietly has dramatically revised downwards its claims about the number of women and children killed in Gaza. Just a week ago, they were claiming that more than 9,500 women had been killed and more than 14,500 children. 2 days later, they reduced those numbers to less than 5,000 women and less than 8,000 children. Now, I hasten to add, if those numbers are true, they are horrible, a horrendous toll, a terrible loss because of a war Hamas has deliberately started and deliberately prolonged. Hamas has deliberately endangered the lives of Palestinian civilians and used them for propaganda purposes. So no loss of innocent lives is good news. But the facts matter, especially when people shout genocide and accuse Israel of targeting civilians. So the UN now revises down the civilian toll by almost half, which means it's admitting that an even higher proportion of deaths are actually terrorists, are Hamas combatants. And remember, if the UN can suddenly drop the estimate of innocent lives lost by almost half, then even those latest figures might not be accurate. The bottom line is that the war must end. The deaths of innocents must come to an end. And for that to happen, Hamas must hand over the remaining hostages and surrender its terrorists. The sooner, the better.